Marchant. Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, I met Barbara at in January at the Western Idaho Fly Fishing Expo. They had asked me to speak at one of the, to talk about high mountain lakes and where people could go fishing. First of all, let me tell you, I don't know anything about fish. I mean, I can go to a lake and go, oh, there goes a fish, but I don't know if it's a cutthroat or a bull trout, but I do know where people fish. And I've been doing this since '09. I write guidebooks. So my books really are about where's the trail, how do you get to the trailhead, what are you going to see on the trail, and where are you going, and try not to get you lost. And it's I've got 5 books. We have a new one that just came out. I published, but I didn't write it, 2 weeks ago. And Cindy's here somewhere, and yeah, we're working together now. She's doing my website. I didn't even know she was coming tonight. And this book is coming out. That is not an easy hike. That's the Idaho Centennial Trail. That book is coming out June 2nd. Jeremy and Lisa Johnson from REI hiked it 2 years ago, but that's the trail that goes from Nevada all the way to Canada. It's 956 miles. There's 110,000 words in that book. It's where all the everything you want to know if you want to try that trail. And you can do it in sections. He's written it in a way that you can do a 100-mile section in the Bitterroots, a 100-mile section in the Frank Church, a 100-mile in the Panhandle. It's a really, really good book, but that's not an easy hike, obviously. I'm not going to do that. So I'll just go over my books real quick. And what I'm going to do is, so when we talked about doing the presentation, Barbara said, we all went to this, not everybody, I don't know how many people went to Louis Lake. How many people went to Louis Lake? And it was it's 2.8 miles round trip to Louis Lake, and it's 800 feet of gain. And she said, yeah, people were complaining it was too hard of a hike, blah, 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 blah. So I said, well, I can put a presentation together where it's like a mile or a mile and a half. It's 3/4 of a mile to get to a place that I've seen fish. I know there's fish there. So I thought instead of just doing hikes, I would also tell you places on the way to the trails where you can fish, where I've seen anglers fishing. So a lot of places that are kind of, you may be familiar with some of these places. And then also where you can camp and then the actual destination to fish. So there's 5 books. This is the Best Easy Hikes book. Everything in here is 5 miles or less, round trip, and less than 1,000 feet of gain. So I wrote this, Barbara, for people that said, hey, I don't like hiking far. Now, there aren't a lot of lakes in here because it's very hard to get to a lake in 2.5 miles, and there's not many lakes in the Boise National Forest. This book is called Exploring Greater Boise, and it goes all the way to Featherville, Loman, Garden Valley, like Sagehen Reservoir, down into the Owahis. And this has no parameters. So it's everything from easy all the way up to very strenuous. Even on an easy hike, I'll mention where you can backpack to. So if people have little kids, they just want to go a mile. I mean, when my kids were really little, it was tough to carry everything in backpacking. So I wish I'd had something like that. And the longest hike in here is probably 14. The sweet spot's 5 to 8 miles. And then the other books I have, McCall Cascade. So this picks up at Round Valley and goes all the way up to Riggins. One of the things from a fishing perspective I like about this book, there's a lot of lakes and it's not very far to get to most of them. Part of that is because it's not wilderness. It's national forest. Once you make something wilderness, like the Sawtooth or the White Cloud Wilderness, they put a boundary around it to make access harder. So in order to get to a high mountain lake, you have to hike a lot of miles to get into the lake. That's not true with the McCall area. In fact, there's no, this doesn't, it goes into the Rapid River, which is up near Riggins. That's a wild and scenic river, but it's not a wilderness. Then I have a Sawtooth book. This is a Sawtooth, White Clouds, and some of the stuff in the Frank Church just north of Stanley, but not stuff you have to drive 42 miles down a dirt road to get to the trailhead. So there's 13 hikes in that area, and then half the book's in the Sawtooth. And then this book just came out last year. It's on the Pioneers, Smoky, and Boulder Mountains, which are around Wood River Valley. So what I thought I would do is, and then this is the dog hiking book that just came out. Some of you may know Deanna Burrell. She's with the ICL, and Matt Clark. They're married. They wrote this. We put it together 2 years from a conceptual standpoint. They hiked 50 trails that are good for dogs. I mentioned water, waste, everything you want to know for whether they need to be on a leash. And they are starting to ticket a lot more in the foothills with people not having their dogs on leash or not removing waste properly. And then there's all the dog parks from Caldwell all the way to East Boise. It's a great book. It's printed in color too. And then that book will be out in June. So if you guys have any questions as we go through, a couple other things. I just signed a contract with National Geographic last fall to help them with their maps for Idaho and distribute their maps. So National Geographic makes a gazillion products. I'm just representing their maps, but they just came out with this, for instance, this is the McCall Cascade map. Has everybody seen a 1040, one of these maps? This is called a 140. It's the most detailed map you can get. They don't sell them anymore because all the trails on here are inaccurate. Most of the trail information's from the 60s, 70s, and maybe the 80s. So, for instance, I just used this, that storm that you were in. I was hiking yesterday over by Hell's Canyon, got caught in that thing. But the trail's completely rerouted from what's on this map. But I was still using it to see the lay of the land. So they have these 150 maps that National Geographic has developed. They're on tear-resistant paper. And this is the McCall Cascade one. Has every single trail, the distance, where the fires were, where the perimeters of the fire, what year it occurred, where the campgrounds are. These are 150s. Not as detailed, but still pretty darn detailed. If you had a map like this, it was 140, it'd be gargantuan. So they have these right now for Sun Valley Ketchum, Sawtooth, McCall Cascade, and the Boise National Forest is so big they had to put it on 2 different maps. There's a south map and a north map. You can get them from me. I mean, I'm selling them, but they also sell them like REI has them, Idaho Mountain Touring, Flying M. So most of the places that carry my books sell the maps too now. And then the last map, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. This is the Bible for going on the backcountry roads. So this is put out by Benchmark, and this is what I use when I'm researching a new guidebook. I'm actually working on a new guidebook right now for the Seven Devils and Hell's Canyon and the very, very western perimeter of the Payette National Forest, like Hip Mountain, Council Mountain. There hasn't been a book for that area since '03. So they're all out of print, and they're about, there's been a lot of fires over there. So anyway, but this is a great map. It has all the campgrounds. They actually drive new roads like every 3 years to make sure that they're accurate for the book. So it's a Idaho Atlas, and they do these for Nevada, California, other states. So I'm going to go through. We got some sunlight there. That's kind of. Is there any? There's no way to block that. Oh, there they go.
Here's a cough drop.
Oh, thank you. I don't know why I'm nervous, but I am. It's because I'm speaking to fishermen or fisherwomen, and I don't know anything about fishing. So, anyway, this is Kinnelly Creek near. I was there and getting ready to hike this trail, and these kids were on. I mean, I thought that's so Idaho. That's so cool. Anyway. And there's a reason why people get lost when they're in the backcountry. You get to these signs, how many things can we put up on a sign? That's near Featherville. Anyway, so all my books work the same way. This is like Twin Creek. This is a hike out of, I got so many hikes I have to think. This is out of the Stanley book. And I list your distance, your gain, your difficulty, your elevation range you're going to be at. So if you know where the snow is. I was just driving on a road trying to get to a trailhead up near Council. Snow level is about 5,000 feet. I mean, I got to a point where I couldn't go any further in my truck. And if you were doing this last year, at this same day in May, you could probably get up to 7,000 feet. The time to complete it from a fast hiker to a slow hiker, and this is moving speed, and I define how that is defined, the typical season that you can get there. And this is usually pretty, like this year, people are going to go up to Sawtooth Lake and try and get there when it's 100 degrees here, June 1st, and the lake's still going to be frozen. Water availability, any cautionary advice, and whether there's a pit latrine at the trailhead. And then this is kind of the romance. I give you 3 paragraphs and kind of paint a picture so you can decide whether you want to go see this or not. Then there's detailed trailhead directions, and then there's the hike, and that's where I get real specific about it. 1 mile, it does this. If you want to go see a view off trail, hike quarter mile over here, and you'll see something. So we're not going to talk about Twin Creek, though. This is Leslie Gulch. I know a lot of people have been there. How many people have been to Leslie Gulch? So not as many as I thought. So the Oahe Reservoir, you can access it from Leslie Gulch. This is in Oregon, but you access it south of Marsing, and you go south about 18 miles, and then you take a dirt road about 20 back to this. I can't believe it's not protected more than it is. It's a pretty amazing area. When you get back there, the only water is at the Oahe Reservoir. Everything else is high desert, but there's some great hikes in here, Dago Gulch, Juniper Gulch. You can go to a campground. There's the lake, which every time I go there, if you go to that campground in the spring, it's packed. So some of you somebody that fishes this area probably knows what kind of fish are. What are they? Okay, yeah, crappie, right. I saw that online. I was looking at some of these places to see what kind of fish, because there's a lot of information online. A lot of people post stuff online. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, you can drive right there. There's a boat ramp. This is in the fall. The lake's a lot lower, obviously, but there's plenty of shoreline to fish. And there's a campground here. It's not the most scenic campground, but there's 14 of these little things. And I was here in January. The nice thing is you can go back here in January, depending on what the weather is doing here. It's about 3,500 feet elevation. So if you go back here, I'm just going to pull out the easiest hike that you can do in here. It's called Dago Gulch, and it's actually an old road. And there's some information. They have these little placards at most of the trailheads, so you can get some information on how far the trail is. But it's just gorgeous back here. If you've not been into this is an area everybody should see. It is really, really pretty. It's pretty spectacular. It's a lot of different rock formations. The nice thing about this is if you're not a big hiker, it's on a road, so it's nicely graded. And you'll hit private property here at 0.7 of a mile. This is looking back down at the trail. And this was in January. This wasn't this last year. It was a couple years ago, but you can see there wasn't much snow. Yes, in the spring there are snakes, yes. I was just in Hell's Canyon and everybody kept telling me how many, and I've hiked over there for 2 weeks. I nailed every trail from Brownlee Reservoir all the way up to Hell's Canyon Reservoir, and I only saw rattlesnakes on one trail. I couldn't believe how, it's weird how you can sometimes see a bunch and then sometimes you don't see them at all. In fact, I have never seen a rattlesnake in Leslie Gulch, but I know they're there. Another hike here, which is much more scenic, is Upper Leslie Gulch. This is probably the prettiest trail here. There's one restroom or a pit latrine in this area. It's probably about 8 miles in Leslie Gulch. And this one you just hike on a dry wash, and you just follow the dry wash up. It goes about 0.7 of a mile. You have the best rock formations probably anywhere in here. This is Juniper Gulch, not Upper Leslie Gulch. In the easy hike right here, it's about 1.8 mile. If you have stamina and you really want to get a view, you can hike from here and drop down back into the gulch and come right up here to the top of this sucker and go all the way to the end. And the views, it's 2.5 miles to get all the way to the top. So when you come into Leslie Gulch, here's Dago Gulch, the trail I showed you earlier. And here's the road that goes right through. And then you can't see it, but the lake's over here, or the reservoir. And you just work your way up here. There's a nice it's not a maintained trail, but it's obvious because there's so many people hiking it. And it will get flat right here at kind of a plateau. And then what you do is you hike about a 1/2 mile on the plateau. It slowly gains elevation. And this is called the Yellow Jacket. It's the very end. If you keep going, you'll fall about 1,000 feet. And there's the view. It's amazing. It's 2.5 miles to this point. So it's not that far. But it's called the Yellow Jacket, Juniper Gulch. But it's 0 creeks. You can see it's desert. But it's a nice place to go hiking. If you're down there fishing and you're at the campground and you want to go, do some hikes, there's some great hikes. And there's another one here called Upper Leslie Gulch. These are the 3 main kind of maintained trails in the area. So,
real quick question. So now these trails, are they a little bit like not quite steep elevation or more like gradual?
Well, in the book, I try and say, hey, this is, if it's very strenuous, there's two parameters to determine how hard a hike is: distance and elevation gain. For instance, if you've ever been out to Lucky Peak and you hike, God, I can't think of that. I didn't plan on talking about it, but there's a little thing you can hike. It's 2 miles, but it's 2,000 feet straight up.
Oh, yeah.
So that'd be like going to, Josephine, or not Josephine, but Louis Lake twice, in the same distance. It's super steep. So, for instance, I'm going to show you this next one, and it doesn't have much elevation gain.
So what I'm getting at is some of these like less, like easier hikes,
Mm-hmm.
quite so much elevation, and they're scenic and they're deserty. Those would be okay for somebody who has bad knees like me to help build up your strength,
and that's why.
Be able to hike trails a little bit more elevation to get to these little bit lakes.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I showed Dago Gulch, because that's about the easiest one in that area. And I think it only has like 200 feet of gain. So that's not very much elevation gain. I mean, if you think about it, 200 feet. I mean, the most probably any hike I have for a day hike out and back, maybe a night, it'd be about 4,000. If you climb Bora, Bora's about 5,000. To give you, Bora's like major elevation gain. And a lot easier. So this is the North Fork Trail. This is the North Fork of the Boise River. When I was first, and I've been doing this since '09. So when I was coming out with my Boise book, in Idaho was not nearly as many people as we have today. It was a little more raw going out into the booners here. And this is, you go up to Idaho City, you go about 18 miles north of Idaho City on Highway 21, and you'll take, I can't remember the road, I think it's 374 dirt road, and that road goes all the way to Atlanta, which is like 45 miles. It's way faster, by the way, to go to Atlanta that way than to go from Lucky Peak Reservoir. That's like 62 miles down a dirt road. But anyway, I remember running into a guy, and I had hiked a couple trails. He was with Fish and Game, and I said, hey, is there any more trails around here? I'm writing this guidebook. And he goes, oh, well, there's the North Fork Trail, but the only people that use it are fishermen. And I'm like, is it scenic? He goes, I don't know. You'll have to go check it out. So this area was actually considered for wilderness at one point. And wilderness is, you have national park, and then wilderness is the next designation under. So that's how pretty it is. It's not wilderness, though. It's just national forest. So this is in the Boise National Forest. There's a cabin. This is the trail. Starts out fairly flat. This is a nice hike because it doesn't have a lot of elevation gain. The North Fork, it's 300 feet of gain, 3 miles out and back to where I'm going to take you. There's a Forest Service cabin you can rent right over here called Deer Park. And you'll go about 4/10 of a mile. The trail goes by this giant outcropping. And then what it does is it drops about 100 feet. Here's the trail. It's not very steep. And it drops right down to the North Fork of the Boise River. This is coming out of the Sawtooth. I have pictures here from 2 different months, June 23rd and July 23rd. Not the same year. But I want to show you the difference in the amount of water. The water this year is going to be crazy coming out of the North Fork because the Sawtooths have so much snow. When you come down, you can start fishing pretty much anywhere. You can get access all along this canyon. And the canyon walls are almost 1,000 feet straight up on both sides of you. If you've not been here, it is absolutely gorgeous back here. You can't take bikes or horses, and you can see why. So the only people back here are people on foot.
What book is that one in?
This is in actually the Best Easy Hikes.
Best Easy Hikes. Okay.
Yep. So now see, this is the trail. I want to show you this because if you try and go too early, here's June 23rd. Or I'm sorry, July 23rd. See, the river's a lot more calm. It's going to have a lot more like little pools that you can fish in behind the rocks and whatnot. There's the trail. It's underneath. That's June 23rd. This year is probably going to be higher than that. So the trail comes in here. I came across this. It's okay. You just want to hug this wall. But if you fall in, you're going down to the Snake River somewhere. So there's the trail right there. But I'm just, don't do this in early June. Wait till July before you go do this hike, especially this year. You'll find all these little white sandy beaches. It's really, really pretty back here. There's another view looking up, the canyon walls. And the trail at some points will follow right along the creek or right along the river. It's really easy to fish it anywhere. And then sometimes it'll be 50 feet above, but it never goes too high, and it just goes up for about 1.5 miles, and that's what I put in the Best Easy Hikes book. So this is kind of where you would stop at 1.5 miles, and you only have 300 feet of gain. And when I give you the gain, it's the gain to your destination and back, because sometimes trails go like this, or sometimes they start here and go down. Well, you got to go back up. So I give you the total gain. So as you start getting an idea of what 500 feet of gain and 1,000 feet of gain is, it makes a lot more sense how difficult the hike is.
Would that be a good day trip?
Yes, you could day.
How long would it take to get there?
I would say, well, Idaho City's, 45 minutes, unless you're behind a camper that's going really slow, because you can hardly pass anybody. But then you've got to go another, 25 to 30 minutes north of Idaho City. It's about, I'd say, an hour and a half, hour and 45 to get back there. But you could definitely do it in a day and come back. I mean, I've run into young people at the Saturday, I'm at the Saturday market, I have a booth down there, and I've run into like people 18 going, oh yeah, I go up to Stanley all the time and day hike and come back. I'm like, in the same day? That's like 6 hours of driving. So as you go up the river, it starts getting a little more like at mile 3. It's not quite as, it's still pretty steep, but not, sheer steep. But again, there's a lot of places in here where you can just hop off the trail and go fish. It will spread out at 2.9 miles, and there's a side creek that comes in here called McNutt Creek, and that's the only place you can camp. Otherwise, there is nowhere you could set up a tent. And it's 2.9 miles to this point, so it's a 6-mile round trip, and that's McNutt Creek. If you keep, there's a camp spot there. When I was originally researching this book, I got to this McNutt Creek, and there were like 6 tents set up, and I thought, man, that's a lot of people camping back here. This doesn't seem very, well known. Well, it was a trail crew, and they were ahead of me clearing the trail because I caught up to them, and they were all camping here. But anyway, so that's, you can keep going on that trail, but the further you go, it eventually goes to an old mining town called Graham, which is right on the border of the western side of the Sawtooth. And the only way to get to Graham now, there used to be a bridge there, it's washed out, is you pretty much need an ATV. You can't even hardly do it in a high clearance truck. But that trail eventually goes all the way up, but it doesn't, most people don't go back much further than McNutt Creek. So you might find some of these big ponderosa pines on the trail, and you're going to have to, jump over them. So another place that I see a lot of fishing, and that's my truck. This is Barber Flat. How many people have been to Barber Flat? A few. So Barber Flat's not as far back. So Barber Flat, in that red book, there are 3 hikes here, but none of them are easy. They're all super hard. But you can come here and this is also the North Fork of the Boise River, because the Crooked River, the North Fork kind of comes down and the Crooked River comes right into it, and they merge. And this is called Barber Flat. You only go about 7 miles out of Idaho City, not even that, probably 5 miles out of Idaho City. And there's a dirt road you take, I've got it in the book, I can't think of the number, and it goes up over a little saddle and drops into this big flat area called Barber's Flat. And there's also a U.S. Forest Service cabin you can rent there. And there's a lot of places to camp. There's a lot of places where you can disperse camp, just pull your vehicle right up onto the river. And this is in September, and it was really low. And this is a drought year. I think this was 2 years ago.
Other question. So I know the Crooked River was really hit hard by that fire a few years back. What about this area here?
No, and I'm going to show you the Crooked River next.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good, so the Crooked River is a great, and I'll show you a picture. So so the Crooked River, the road that goes to the North Fork of the Boise River, there's a trailhead. As soon as you pull off Highway 21, it's like a mile from Highway 21 down the dirt road. And that's the north trailhead. The south trailhead, which is this one, is right near Barber Flat. And so in between the south and north trailhead, it's 12.8 miles. You could hike that whole thing if you wanted to. The north used to be the prettiest of the section of this entire Crooked River, was the north, until the Pioneer Fire hit. And I don't know how many people were in 16. It was one of our biggest fires we've had in Idaho in many years. It was a couple 100,000 acres. It torched the Crooked River. So, but it's still got some decent fishing. That's the trailhead. That's the south trailhead. See how, so this used to be, because a fire hit here like 20 years ago. Everything's come back, and now it's looking lush, and it's very pretty. This is in October, so the river's super low.
Have they rebuilt the bridge at Crooked River?
Which
bridge that kind of went across there?
Oh, over Lamar Creek?
At the very beginning.
Yes. Well, they had just gotten the funding. They had to do, it's so weird the U.S. Forest Service has to go make a grant to get a bridge, but they did get the money. So I'm assuming that was 2 years ago I haven't hiked it since that bridge has been fixed. So the Crooked River, that's what it looks like at the trailhead. This used to look like that other picture I showed you. It just got torched. But I've hiked it in June, mid to late June. The wildflowers are unbelievable if you're into wildflowers, because now there's no trees blocking the sun, and this year we're going to have a lot because of all the moisture. But it's still a great place to fish. When you first start hiking, that's what you see, and you're like, I'm not sure I want to do this. Here's the trail. So this bridge had to be fixed, and then the bridge she was talking about is kind of over here. There's a creek that comes in off Highway 21 called Lamar Creek. And there's the river. One of the things the fire did do, it helped got rid of a lot of the brush. It was really brushy all along the river. And the other thing is now you can see all the rock outcroppings, because you couldn't see them before because it was all forested. And there's tons of little pools on the river. And I know the first mile gets a lot of fishing pressure. Up to the bridge. There's the bridge. I took 2 pictures. So this is before the fire, so you can see what it looked like. And there's after the fire. In fact, that's before the fire, and there's after the fire. So it really knocked this area out. And it's really the first 2 miles. After a couple miles, the fire's less prominent. It's more of a mosaic burn, and that's where it burns a little bit, and then it's green, and burns a little bit, and it's green. That's actually a healthy type fire. And you can go about 3 miles, and then it will kind of dead end. I don't want to say it dead ends. The easy maintained part of the trail dead ends, and there's a beach here, and you could actually fish here. After this, the trail is not used as much, and it starts side hilling up here. And it's super steep, and it goes up and down, and it goes all the way